There he is. Ah.
Good morning, Jules. Or is it
Oh,
night for you? What time is it?
it's 6:30 p.m. here.
And it is 9 o'clock a.m. here in New York.
Yes, and you're looking fresh as always.
And you, my dear Jules, I've been missing your sweet countenance and jocular demeanor.
Oh, come on. You know I don't know what those words mean.
Well, I didn't call you a jock. I said you were jocular.
Okay. Well, your way with words is part of the reason I always enjoy speaking with you. So thank you for making this happen.
I would do anything you asked me to do.
Oh, all
I
right.
love
Well, it's
you.
that's recorded now.
I'm stuck now. Okay.
Yeah.
How have
Oh,
your days been in Goa, right? You're in Goa.
in Goa, India, and India in general has been relatively chill when it comes to the coronavirus. India doesn't have many confirmed cases of the virus. My concern is that they're also not testing very much.
Mm.
So I think they have maybe, I don't know, 100 or so confirmed cases, but I think they don't have more than 12,000 tests at the moment.
Okay. All right.
So it's one of those numbers look good, but you can make numbers do whatever you like them to do.
Yeah. Right.
And how's New
Yeah.
York treating you? What's the New York vibe like?
Well, we're at the epicenter here. You know, things are really exploding in terms of numbers
Hmm.
of cases, and the lack of supplies is felt here as well quite intensely.
Mm.
It's a good time to pick up the phone and call people you haven't spoken with in a while and just let them know that you've been thinking about them and checking in to make sure they're okay.
Definitely.
Um, Good opportunity to be the good Samaritan and the good friend.
Yeah, which we would like to be, but sometimes we don't always have the time for, or we don't feel we have the time for.
That's more like it, I think.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. All right. Well, why don't we jump into it?
Sure.
I'm really curious. I think um, I posted a little bit about your background, um, and kind of the stuff that's usually on your bio. But I was wondering if you could tell me a little bit before we jump into the deep end. Maybe you could tell me a little bit about like when you were growing up, because I don't really know much about that. Did you grow up, I believe your heritage is Jewish, but did you grow up like observing Judaism? Is that something that reflects now into how you approach the practice? You grew up in New York, right?
Oh, yeah, I'm a city rat, and I'm a dyed-in-the-wool New Yorker.
Mm-hmm.
And, my parents were divorced when I was very young, so I was the only child of a single mom. And that meant having the privilege of kind of uh, inventing a childhood for myself and
Mm-hmm.
exploring the city and spending a lot of time in museums and parks and things.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the uh, the Jewish faith or culture was never a particularly active part of growing up for me. My grandmother's family died in the Holocaust,
Mm-hmm.
but it was never talked about. And my parents were not religious at all. My father described himself once as a religious atheist.
Oh, that's
As
kind of a
far as he
Jewish
was
thing
concerned,
though, huh?
yeah, well, meaning he was a devoutly atheistic person that
Uh-huh.
who really did not um, give much credit to divinity who would allow. He once said to me, I came to see him in my devotee robes, big mistake. And
Uh-huh.
he got very angry and said, any God who allows to happen what happened to crack babies in Harlem and the tragedies around the world, they'll screw him. And I was really angry about it.
Mm.
And so I've learned not to shove my beliefs down other people's throats. It doesn't really do much good. But no, there wasn't much particular. I mean, look, my mom and dad were communists. They met in a cell meeting in New Jersey.
Oh, wow.
Um,
I didn't know that.
there's a long line of lefties. So,
Hmm.
Bibles and other religious texts were not our favorite books. That
Okay.
wasn't a part of childhood.
Hmm.
No, grew up, went to ethical culture. The ethical culture schools. They're
No. Mm-mm.
it's a humanist movement that grew out of the Second World War,
Okay.
and which holds learning in high esteem, community service in high esteem, in a sense, somewhat like the Quakers,
Okay. Yeah.
but stripped of any theology.
Hmm.
Ethical culture is a strictly secular view of the world and creation.
Right.
So that's a little bit of the background there.
Mm. Nice. I wonder, we started the last time we were speaking, we started a little bit about this idea, this conflict of what happens when our belief system, which may include, as you said, creation that is here with purpose, right? So it has, let's say, either a creator or that there is a divinity that helps to lay out some kind of path for us that comes with an inherent meaning or purpose to it. And how do we make sense of that belief system or that world when we see or are confronted with meaningless situations, painful situations, or as you said, what good is a God in my worldview if there are children dying of crack because of addiction within the parents, and Holocaust survivors and genocides around the world? I mean, so
Mm.
I guess we'll start with the light stuff first.
Yeah, I was thinking, you started off easy here. That's great.
Yeah.
No pressure.
Yeah.
Well, I think you've probably had experiences similar to my own, that there will always be a community of people who are predisposed to seeing the world in a very beautiful way.
Mm-hmm.
It's a marvelous creation after all, and
Mm-hmm.
there are miracles around us at every moment. And isn't that a wonderful thing? That if
Mm-hmm.
we have the eyes to see it, we can be inspired by anything. There are
Mm-hmm.
stories of mystics who, Brother Lawrence, for example, in France in the 1600s, who would walk out of his monastery and saw a tree, the same tree he'd seen for 20 years, and he fainted,
Mm.
just swooned, because finally the miracle of creation had penetrated, gotten through to him, and
Mm-hmm.
and and it overwhelmed him. He woke up 6 hours later, and so anything can be an inspiration. The
Mm.
same two people looking at the same circumstances. One person devoid of any training in the mystic traditions or yoga culture, the other person with the blessing of that kind of background and training, see things in two very different ways. The
Mm-hmm.
same thing, whether it's an object or an event like we're experiencing now, from two different perspectives,
Mm.
uh, yield vastly different impressions.
Right.
So, there's an opportunity here, I think, I mean, especially your students and followers and fans who I suspect are of that privileged community
Yeah.
to see things through a different lens. Then we can begin to ask ourselves, how do we reconcile these extremes? And they are
Mm-hmm.
extremes after all. Um, what to do about the anomalies, the contradictions. And
Right.
it's those people who cannot resolve that question who are my concern.
Right.
I love being in the company of people like you've invited me to your classes, and I love being in that group because they get it. They're already there.
Mm-hmm.
The people who are of greater concern to me are intellectuals, rational thinkers who don't have the benefit of that practice and that training and that education, that other kind of, non-empiric education, if you will, the
Right.
transcendent education.
I like
What?
that non-empiric and transcendent education.
Sure. This is a deep study. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, one of the reasons why I appreciate you so much is, you didn't finish your 200 hours and hang out a shingle saying yoga teacher. You know,
Mm-hmm.
you've gone deep into it. You study the texts. You have an understanding of the philosophy and the background. That's really critical. I think if people want to take their yoga practice further, they really have to be concentrating on finding a teacher who's done the rigorous study, who's got that background, who has a command of the theology and the philosophy and the cosmology, so that these deeper issues that we're here to talk about this morning have cogent, compelling answers and explanations.
Right. So, what is the foundation with which somebody approaches this question as a really important place to even begin to have a conversation, at least?
Right.
Yeah.
The people who have my respect and admiration, first of all, do not claim to have all the answers.
Mm-hmm.
They're wise enough, and I'm talking now about people. I'm going to be 70 in a month or so,
Come
and
on.
my peers, my contemporaries, and the people I like to hang out with are fellow instructors from universities, or I have a friend I was just talking to yesterday who is a brilliant scholar, absolutely brilliant. He's a young man, married with a young daughter, who has studied the life of the sages and the saints and the yogis from the 17th through the 20th centuries in Bengal.
Oh,
Has
wow.
a tremendous command of that history and the contribution that those great thinkers and practitioners have made over the years. Tragically, he emailed me to tell me that his young daughter has been diagnosed with COVID-19.
Oh, wow. Mm-hmm.
So, you know, there's the rubber's hitting the road here. You know, reality is coming up against theory and abstractions in a way that's perhaps more vivid and real than we've seen in our lifetime.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's a good opportunity. It's a good opportunity to go deeper into our understanding. For example, some people, unfortunately, bring karma into the discussion.
Okay.
I find that a heartless and cruel exercise.
Mm.
Sure, can we accept that there's some, call it a karmic background architecture to creation? Sure. But to allow that to bias your view of events by thinking, oh, people are getting what they deserve, is a very, very shallow and inaccurate understanding of a very profound concept like karma.
You know, maybe we can just stay with this idea of karma for a moment. I remember I was sitting with a Buddhist teacher in Dharmasala, and he said, before we start, there's 4 things that you have to understand that nobody can explain to you fully. One is perception, which you've touched on already. And there's a verse in the Yoga Sutra in the 3rd chapter, Vastu samye chitta beda tayor vibhakta panta, that each individual person perceives the same object in a different fashion depending on their own state of mind and how they project onto that object. Right? So perception, you don't know if you're seeing the same blue as somebody else. Another one was reincarnation or rebirth. Many of us believe that this is true. We want it to be true. Can we explain how exactly this works? What is migrating? What is the transmigrational soul? What part stays? What part dies? What part doesn't die? And one of the third thing was karma. And it was quite refreshing for somebody who was very learned to say, karma is such an incredibly complex framework that to say you can explain it fully or deeply would be to misunderstand karma. We are the way that we are because the universe is the way the universe is, but to what extent does that help us, really? To what extent do I have to blame the beginning of creation for what I'm experiencing now? As opposed to letting go of some kind of that gripping to find agency within the things that seem to be abstract or painful. And I think humans are very good at this assigning agency, and karma seems to be one of those actions. Like, why did this happen to me? What does it mean? I remember I was walking with somebody recently, and we were walking down a path, and a snake very quickly cut across our path. And the person next to me kind of jumped, and instead of saying, "Oh, a snake," she said, "Oh, what does it mean?" Just like as a gut reaction. And it struck me as a very curious tendency that we as humans have. You know, what does all this life mean to me?
Yeah, well said. Very well said. It's a natural inclination for any thoughtful person to try to make sense of the world we inhabit.
Mm-hmm.
We want to know why am I here? How did I get here? Why do things work the way they do? Where are we going?
Mm-hmm.
You know, I have a brother who's a wonderful physicist, Brian Greene,
Yeah.
and we have this conversation all the time. And you know, we come at it from different angles. He comes at it from the perspective of a theoretical physicist. I come at it from the perspective of a purveyor of bhakti culture. And we're looking at the same universe, as you said a moment ago. Blue is blue in different ways for different people.
Right. Yeah.
But it's a natural thing, natural inclination to want to make sense of things that really seem senseless. If you step back from that and pose it as the larger question, in philosophy, the word would be theodicy. The word theodicy means how do we reconcile evil in a purposeful creation? How do you reconcile evil and good in the same cosmic vision of things? And there's a very famous book by Rabbi Harold Kushner, When Bad Things Happen to Good People.
Yeah.
It came out like 20 years ago. Became an instant bestseller. Kushner had the very tragic experience, he and his wife, of seeing their young son die of a disease called progeria. I think it's pronounced progeria or progeria, as in geriatric. Progeria means rapid aging. So they saw him become an old man, die at age 12. So he was a boy. He died of old age and looked like an old man, with his face wizened and his skin shrunken, shriveled, and so on. And Kushner, who had been raised in the Jewish tradition, had to rethink his entire view of the cosmos, of how the universe operates. You know, he'd always had this idea that if you're good, well, the universe will reward you. You know, if you follow the rules, live a good life. Well, it didn't happen. So he had to rethink things. So for him, it came down to either God is all good or God is all powerful, but God could not possibly be both. If God is all good, then how is there evil in the world? And if God is all powerful, then he couldn't be all good because there's evil happening. So for him, he couldn't stomach the idea.
Couldn't reconcile the two.
Could not reconcile the two, and he came down on the side of God is all good but not all powerful. That we have to carve out some space for evil in creation because God can't control it. Well, you know, there's pluses and minuses in that perspective. But I think the important thing here, Jules, more than anything else, is posing the questions. The dialogue is what is critical.
The dialogue.
I don't know if we're going to come up with answers. And if they are, if answers are proposed, they're going to be simplistic. I think we should avoid that. These are complex issues.
Yeah, and thank you for that. I mean, I think the idea for me of assigning agency, of this desire to assign agency, of wanting to see how not only how does this affect me, but of course the question is, how did I come in to deserve this? As you were saying in the story, that if I do X, then Y will come. And it's this discussion within karma that gives an easy answer, but the trouble is, when do you find paradox? So of course, you do good actions and you do sometimes see good effects from that. Sometimes you do good actions and you see bad effects from that. Sometimes terrible things happen to good people, as we all know. It's nothing new. But it seems that there's so much follow-up pain from the thought that it's unfair, that it's unjust, and that this was done to me.
Yeah. Okay. You're as I expected, doing a wonderful job of summarizing some very complex ideas. So here's the good news. Here's the good news. All right. The good news is that you cannot become so deeply implicated in karma that you lose your soul. The soul, go to the second chapter of Bhagavad Gita, and we see that the soul is immutable, unchangeable, ever the same, cannot be cut by a weapon, cannot be withered by the wind, cannot be burned by fire.
Cannot be wet by water.
Eternally, transcendently beautiful. In this moment and forever, we are beautiful creatures. Life has a purpose. Let's start from the beginning. We have a purpose in being alive. I remember talking with Mehmet Oz, Dr. Oz. Yeah. And he said, he's a yoga practitioner.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
We were talking about what the yoga does for him. And he says yoga is a way of calming my mind so that I can go into a clear space, and that space is a space in the heart. Right. He said, it may sound corny, but we're here to love. We're here to learn to love again. And he said, that may sound corny, but think about it. How often have heart problems followed soon after some tragic experience, the loss of a loved one, the breakup with a partner, some other tragedy, and the heart begins to palpitate. We talk about soft hearts, cold hearts, broken hearts. The heart is not just that physical organ. It's also, according to the Sanskrit text, the seat of the soul. The atma is floating on currents of air in the region of the heart. Okay. The source of consciousness emanates from that place. That's the fireplace from which the fire of consciousness is emanating. So the yoga is a gateway into the heart. And where we come through yoga practice, effective yoga practice, the kind that you teach, is an awareness of the true self that dwells in that particular geographic region. Imagine getting up in the morning and remembering, I'm not defined by all my trauma. I'm having trauma, but I am not the trauma. I'm the witness of that trauma. I'm the consciousness within this body vehicle that's carrying me around. And what is the nature of that true self? The self that was there before we were born in this lifetime, the self that will be there after this body dies. Right. Satchidananda Vigraha. It's eternal. It's fully cognizant, fully self-aware, and joyful. Ananda. We're joyful creatures. Why is it that we seek pleasure and avoid pain? It's because it's our nature to be joyful creatures. And Vigraha, that term often gets ignored. Vigraha means irreducible personality. That we are individual beings, not just now, but throughout eternity. You're a person, I'm a person, the people with us on this conversation today, each of us is an individual being, not just in this body, but even after you achieve full self-realization, the material self dissolves and the spiritual self emerges. So there's no need to be concerned that you're just going to dissolve away into nothingness. You're there and you're a beautiful person. Of course, I've always known that about you.
Oh, tell me more. I mean, but this is an interesting, maybe let's just touch on that for a moment, because you could say that a large portion of fear, at least within myself, is that so often that the transformation will be so complete, the person that I think of as me now will no longer exist. And sometimes when I'm practicing, I don't always feel like I'm ready for that leap. Right? So I want to do, there's always a part of me that is wanting to maintain selfhood, let's say, right? Like there's a, sometimes Sri Brahmananda would call it, when Patanjali calls it abhinivesha, negative instinctual driving forces of self-preservation that causes fear where fear doesn't need to be, right? So I protect something that was never in jeopardy in the first place.
Oh, nicely said. Nicely
Right?
said, yes.
But it doesn't stop, it doesn't necessarily stop me from wanting to protect it.
Sure.
But what you were saying is because sometimes it's sat chit and mostly ananda, right? That bliss is the word, or joy is the word that's thrown around. And sometimes people even say that the personality, that the personhood is what we're trying to transcend. And so I think for many people, it could actually be really a bit more of a mature take about what you're saying, compared to what they might have been exposed to in the past, which is completely about how to get rid of this thing that I call myself.
Yeah. Well, that's, yeah, you put your finger on a big challenge for people entering the yoga culture. So let's talk about that a little bit. First of all, just from, pardon the use of this word, from an ontological level, on the level of our ground of being, if we define spirit as the opposite of matter, and matter is perishable, then spirit is imperishable. So if we are individual souls now, we must be so eternally. Let me explain. Many people come to yoga, and what do they hear? They hear, practice your yoga, come to the fulfillment of your yoga, and what happens? Enlightenment. Right? Jivan Mukta. What happens? Your ego dissolves, your personhood dissolves, form dissolves, differences between things go away, and you become one with Brahman, Kaivalya.
Right.
You merge into the existence of all energy.
Right.
Personally, I can't think of anything more terrifying than that idea of I'm going to merge one day and dissolve into nothing.
Right. Disappear completely, drop in the ocean.
Yeah, that's an existential crisis.
Yeah.
Right there.
That sounds terrible.
It may offer some relief. I mean, the world is a tragic place sometimes, and you feel like just crawling up in a dark closet for a while.
And excuse me, I'm really depressed. I'm going to go be enlightened for a couple of weeks. I'll be back.
Right. I'm off grid for 2 weeks.
Yeah, I'm off grid.
And that's fine. But how long can you sustain that?
Mm-hmm.
The soul is a social creature. The soul interacts with other souls.
Right.
So we're going to want company again. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So why is it that people have that impression? Well, many of the yogis who came west in the 60s came out of the South Indian school, the Shankarite school, which is the Advaita Vedanta perspective. In India, there are these two, you might say, categories of understanding. One is the Advaita Vedanta school, the other is the Bhakti school. In Advaita Vedanta, the goal is this undifferentiated merging of the self with all energy. Right. And the disappearance of selfhood. The self is no longer separate from all of creation. Right. Well, there's truth to that. That's not wrong. It's just incomplete. And Shankara had a reason for teaching that particular part of the cosmology of the Vedic vision. We can go into that some other time. Right. The Bhakti perspective, the devotional perspectives, adds the missing piece of the puzzle, which is that if we are individuals now, it means that there could not have been some time in cosmic history when this undifferentiated, indestructible Brahman energy got cut up somehow magically into little pieces, little souls, distributed around the universe, and that at some time in the future, when we achieve self-realization, we'll get, crazy glued back onto that Brahman totality. Right. If the soul
Right.
is indestructible, that idea defeats the very definition of indestructible.
Mm-hmm.
So we are individual. The soul is an individual. That never goes away.
Right.
So qualitatively, the Advaita Vedanta vision is correct. We are one with the Brahman totality.
Mm-hmm.
Quantitatively, we are not.
Mm-hmm.
God is great. We are small.
Mm-hmm.
And isn't that a wonderful thing? By remaining individual, it means that I can love you as much as I do, because we're two different people.
Shamdas would call it, I mean, not just Shamdas, but many people would call this qualified non-dualism, right? So it's still non-dualism, but it has this, as he would say, cool dual.
Vishishta.
Yeah.
There's a qualification. It's not undifferentiated duality. Very good.
Yeah.
Or an undifferentiated oneness. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's how love happens. Love. If our purpose here is to love, then we have to be individuals,
Mm-hmm.
and that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
So that's some background there to a misunderstanding I think that many people have about the goal of yoga practice. Now, what does it mean practically? What does that mean?
Right.
It means that we can relax. You can calm down. You can be comfortable and reassured, knowing that you're okay. You're an immutable, indestructible spark of divine energy. You're beautiful. Nothing can harm you. I mean, what an empowering idea that is.
Right.
And what happens when you get to that? That's a jivan mukta. That's a jivan mukta. Someone who understands, I'm okay, I'm being cared for. So what can I do now? I can be here for you.
Mm-hmm.
I do not have to be wondering when we talk, what's in this for me? What do I get out of this?
Right.
I'm okay. I don't need anything. Mm-hmm. How can I be of service? How can I help you? That's an amazing way to start your day.
Yeah. I mean, you're reminding me of so many things. This is another thing that Sri Brahmananda would say often is yoga is the state in which you are missing nothing. Right? So this idea that if I'm okay, or sometimes you hear this within the Buddhist perspective of loving your enemies. If you're truly able to love the people around you who may wish you harm, if they're happy, you remove their reason to cause harm. You remove their reason by bringing them a certain level of acceptance or contentment. And when we are content and not trying to protect that fragility, that perceived fragility, then wow, the doors open up, the space opens up.
First of all, Jules, I so appreciate how you often cite your spiritual teacher, your guru. That's a wonderful quality, and I thank you for setting a good example. I should do the same. My teacher, Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, it was my inspiration. And I think that's what we're called upon to do. If we're faithful disciples, we should ourselves become agents of change in the world. That's what I think. If people really knew what yoga was about, they'd run the other way. They'd give away the yoga mat and go to a Pilates class. Yoga is a very revolutionary idea that first come to know yourself, know that you're okay. You're a divine being. You're a spirit spark, and now get out there and do something. Because there are people out there who do not know that and consequently are suffering from this delusion that this is the me and I'm vulnerable. That's a tremendous calling. It may be the single greatest message that we can put out in the world today is, get over yourself already. Stop being so hung up over the problems of your life. You're okay. You may be having some challenges right now, and God only knows the world's in a challenging place at this moment.
Yeah.
But stop going more inside your cocoon as a consequence of that, and start thinking more broadly, how can we be a part of a larger approach to setting things right. I mean, that's what the Bhagavad Gita is all about, isn't it? It's the battle of Kurukshetra.
Yeah.
And we're all
You
on
know,
unique battlefields here.
this is a great, I think, a good place to kind of to veer toward, because there's two things that I hear a little bit, and the first one is, there is something that, when recognized, brings with it a certain sense of responsibility. Right? So it's not only that I recognize some kind of universal truth or kindness or soul or connection to the divine, but it's that once I have found that, the heart becomes, as you said, a furnace, a place on fire, and then there is this desire to share that with others. And there can sometimes be this danger of sharing something before you actually know what you think you know.
Yes.
If that makes sense.
That rings a really loud bell for me.
Yeah, you could say that even this underlies some fanaticism, not
A
really
little bit of
understanding something well.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. No,
and
you
so,
really put your finger on it there.
but I also want to say that that pull is always there. So even if you don't understand something well, when you understand something, it changes you, and you recognize the pain and suffering that was there previously, and then you want to share that with somebody else, right? That's why somebody might teach. That's why somebody might invite a friend to a Bhagavad Gita class on a Tuesday evening with Joshua Greene for 12 years. It might be why they do something. So there's a call to duty, as you referenced Krishna speaking to Arjuna on Kurukshetra. There's something that's called within us. But there's also sometimes a need to temper it before it's been matured. Could you talk about that a little bit?
Certainly. Patanjali talks about practicing yoga with respect to two principles, satya and ahimsa.
Mm-hmm.
Be honest about where you are on your spiritual path. Don't pretend to be something you're not.
Mm-hmm.
And do no harm in your outreach to others. Don't presume to know so much that you can now become some wise teacher yourself. I think you and I have unfortunately both known a number of people who advertise themselves as teachers. And I have to be honest with you, Jules. I go to classes, all over the place because I get invitations to come and hold discussions. And I set it on the classes, and there's this little Dharma talk at the beginning, for a few minutes. I don't know what they're saying. I don't understand. Lose your kleshas and give up the dharmas of this, and lose your ego. And if you lose your ego, check with Lost and Found at the front desk. I don't know what they're talking about.
Yeah.
These are very, very deep concepts. In your email to me, you mentioned talking about dharma. You wanted to talk about, these are profound, profound ideas.
Yeah.
And so be honest about where you are. You can always do something, but be realistic about what that something should be, and don't go past them until you're ready.
Yeah. I mean, I find that within the current kind of collective way that yoga is now expressing itself, that there is always the expectation from the teacher side, or maybe from the student side, that something profound has to happen. That the practice is one of constant fireworks instead of a daily grind. And sometimes that is lost. Now, I don't want to discourage it, but kind of finding the balance between doing the work, like you said, and having the honest reflection, and the exploration, but also not expecting everything to be the most profound thing ever. That sometimes the most regular thing is the most beautiful. Like you said, the tree is the tree that moves me.
Well, again, you're doing such a wonderful job of summarizing very complex ideas here. Um, if we give credence to the Sanskrit descriptions in the Puranas and the Upanishads, then we've been here a very, very long time. The soul has been transmigrating from life to life to life, millions and millions of births.
Right.
But conditioning runs really deep. And I don't think we should underestimate how conditioned we are. We live in an Amazon Prime delivery in 5-hour culture, where we expect everything, including enlightenment, to be delivered to our door in the space of minutes.
Which we should just say, maybe we should just say that we do guarantee enlightenment by the end of this conversation, or people can have a full refund, 100% refund.
Full refund, absolutely.
Yeah. All questions answered, and some questions that weren't asked, we will answer those too. That's right, and just send your dollars to PO Box 311. Yeah, exactly.
If it's, I remember one class up at Jivamukti, a young person came up to me and said, "Hey, Yogesvara, I've been chanting Hare Krishna now for 6 months, and I still haven't seen Krishna."
What?
I mean, 6 months. It could take 600 lifetimes.
That's so funny.
Or it can take 1 minute. It depends on the depth of our sincerity. If you truly want this, bring it to your chanting. Give yourself up to the chanting. It's not some mechanical process.
Right.
Jules, I've been doing this for a half century now.
Yeah.
Chanting every day, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. And in the beginning, it was mechanical, because this was what, I took a vow to follow certain principles, being vegetarian or now vegan, chanting a prescribed number of mantras every day.
Yeah.
And I have to confess to you that after 50, 51, however many years of devotional life, if I'm going to be honest, I would have to say it's only been within the past 10 years, maybe, that Krishna has ceased to be a concept or an idea.
Right.
And has started to actually become a person for me. It takes a long time, but you can get there. Arjuna told Krishna, in the 6th chapter, Krishna describes in the Gita how to practice the mystic yoga. Sit on kusa grass covered by a deer skin, focus on the tip of the nose, merge the outcoming and incoming breaths, no sex, no food, no nothing, And Arjuna goes, I can't do it. It's too hard. Trying to calm the restless wind. And Krishna reassures him, yes, you can do it. By adapting the right yoga for you and with determination. That's why there's so many different yogas, because there's different personalities. My hatha yoga is so ridiculous, that a dog isn't interested in seeing my downward dog. I mean, it's crazy.
I don't
Bhakti
know about
appealed
that,
to me.
I hear what you're saying.
Bhakti appealed to me.
Yeah.
There are different, Raja yoga, karma yoga, so many yogas, because there are different personalities.
Yeah.
Find the path that is appropriate to you, and stick with it. Don't be don't window shop.
Right.
Going from here to there. You have to see a path through to its conclusion. Then it's effective. It's like a medicine. You have to take it regularly according to the doctor's prescription, and then it'll work.
Right.
Yoga works, but you have to stay with it and continue to deepen your understanding of its purpose.
Yeah.
So I'm so glad we're having this conversation. I can't help but think maybe somebody will find something useful. Here's some practical ideas.
Yeah.
So my dear friend Anuradha, who makes sense out of my life these days, put together a virtual potluck dinner.
Oh,
If you're stuck at home, why not, have dinner with friends in a Skype call or a Zoom call or something?
yeah.
You can all be honoring the Lord's prasad in your home and also having
Yes.
darshan and sadhana and so on. So that's a
Yeah.
nice idea. Um, it's
Yeah.
also a good opportunity to volunteer. I
Mm.
work with an agency called Blue Card, which serves elderly, well, they're all elderly now, but Holocaust survivors who are homebound, impoverished. Many of them have cancer or some other condition. I can't visit them in their homes, but I can pick up the phone and call them and just let them know
Yeah.
someone cares about them. There are little things we can do even if we're sequestered at home.
Yeah, and maybe I guess for our people in the States, I will recommend the Poor People's Campaign. If you just check out the Poor People's Campaign, which has been around since the instigation of the civil rights movement, and they work a lot with people who experience incredible bouts of loneliness, like you're saying, the elderly. But it's also important to be clear that some people don't have access to or the knowledge about how to use these technologies. Whether it's something as simple as doing a FaceTime call, and that actually just a phone call to
Yeah.
somebody's landline is a very powerful thing, and you can do this from anywhere. And there are so
This
many
is,
organizations that support this.
yeah, I second that completely. It's something that's come to me with great difficulty, that the greatest gift sometimes that I can offer somebody is just
Yeah,
to shut my mouth, just
yeah,
to stop talking and just listen.
mm-hmm,
People want to know that somebody cares enough to hear them,
yeah,
to hear what they have to say. And that's hard for me. And I was brought up in a Krishna tradition where, we're supposed to know everything, right?
right, yeah,
You don't know, I do. I'm going to clue you in, right? So,
yeah,
but sometimes the greatest thing is just to be quiet and listen attentively and be compassionate and
yeah,
understanding of someone else's situation. Not trying to solve the problem. Be very, ladies and gentlemen, whoever's out there listening just now, please be very careful about trying to solve other people's problems. Bad idea. Just let them know that you're there and you care about them.
yeah.
That's the
I
key.
think this is a really great place to end because what you're giving is so practical, and I feel like sometimes we give people too much, and maybe I can just add a story to that. So there's a woman who lived in the building that I live in New York City. Her name was Audrey, and she's not old. She's in her 60s, but because of a specific type of respiratory ailment, she couldn't leave the house. She was on a air tank. She had smoked for a long time. She had done heroin for a long time. She had just a really hard life. And her partner was in the hospital. And so one day I just went by and I knocked on her door and I said, let me hang out with you. Let me just like spend some time. And she said, oh my gosh, I'm so afraid. I'm in the apartment by myself. And there's more of a backstory, but one day she just wanted me to come over and watch wrestling with her. She just wanted me to lay down with her because she loved the Worldwide Wrestling Federation. And so, that's what I just didn't say anything. I wasn't there like, oh, you're at the end of your life and you have cancer and are you making plans and like any of this. It was just like we watched. Yeah, and she's like, oh no, look out.
Yeah, that's nice. That's really nice. I think if people from my generation, baby boomers, grew up in
Hmm.
the 60s and all that, and, took to some spiritual path, if there's one big mistake we made more than anything else, it was posturing that now we're such spiritual people and we forgot to be warm-blooded human beings.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Isn't that really ultimately what our yoga is all about?
Mm-hmm.
It's not losing yourself in some other dimension, but going deeper inside the life you have to discover the innate qualities of the soul that can actually reach out and make a huge difference in someone else's life.
Mm-hmm.
And isn't that a wonderful thing?
Yeah. Yogeshwara, there is no doubt in my mind that you have touched the lives of so many just with nothing else than with your incredible humility. And I want to, again, thank you for taking this time. It's something that has always inspired me to see somebody whose mind moves so beautifully to also have that humility and for taking part in this. And of course, I wouldn't know you if it wasn't for Sharon, your connection to her. So I'm so thankful for that. And we might not know you if it wasn't for your teacher, and on and on and on it goes.
I'll try to live up to that expectation on your part.
Mm.
Thank you, Jules.
Thank you, Yogeshwara, and thank you everybody for tuning in. It looked like we had some really good attendance. There were some questions that were coming up that I tried to include as we were going along. I'm sorry if I couldn't get to all of them. Please, if this is your first time being in the digital satsang of Yogeshwara, you can find more on Gita Wisdom, which is in his Instagram, which is the account he's using now. His podcast, you still have your podcast up for the Bhagavad Gita courses that you gave?
Oh, yeah. There's
Yeah.
honorary credit for that too. There's a lot up there.
Years and years of teachings just available for people. So please check them out use his name on iTunes. He's got some fantastic books, and I look forward to doing this again at some point. I think
When you're back in the States,
yeah,
let's go visit your neighbor together.
please, that would be wonderful. And for those of you that are in Paris, Jivamukti Yoga Paris is having do you know Ian? Do you remember Ian?
Ian Sidlowski. Don't very well.
Yes,
What a
you
wonderful guy.
see? So of course, Ian, he is opening up Jivamukti in Paris, which is opening like right now. So the opening got postponed, but they're offering a satsang this evening. And they're going to be live streaming it, so anybody can tune in and chant or just listen. Thank you, Yogeshwara.
Thank you, Jules. Much love.
Much love. Bye-bye.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.